Hello everyone. I'm very excited today because I'm using my lavalier mic for the first time because I finally decided to buy an adapter for it so I can actually plug it into my camera. So I'm very excited to be here with my actual mic now. I feel professional and great, even though I'm wearing pajama pants right now. I'm gonna put it here so that I don't hold it all the time. But yeah. Very exciting for me, this moment is. Ow. In this video, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite movies, but I'm also going to mention towards the end some other movies that I like and think are good movies and that I recommend to people because they have specific things in them that stand out to me and that I think were done well in the movie. So they're not my favorite movies, but they are movies that I think are really good and that I will always remember in the back of my mind. The first movie that we have on my favorites list is Emma, the one from 2020, directed by Autumn de Wilde, and I think that's how you pronounce her name. Sorry. So this story is a Jane Austen adaptation. I've read a few Jane Austen books. I've only read 2. Anyway, but I haven't read Emma, so I don't have a point of reference when it comes to the book itself. However, I don't care right now. So this story takes place in the 1800s, and it's a story of an English girl who loves to meddle in her friends' love affairs and help them out, but at the same time, she's also kind of selfish and doesn't think about how that affects the people involved themselves. But she also doesn't have bad intentions. So it's kind of like a little bit chaotic and she lacks a little bit of self-awareness, let's say. But it's great, okay? It's great. Like I said, I haven't read the book Emma, but I think that this did a good job in telling the story. I love the pastel colors of the movie, and the costuming was also done really well. Like, it wasn't one of those period pieces that it just looks terrible. I think the actors also did a great job because I've looked on YouTube for other scenes from the movie Emma that were done before from different adaptations, and in comparison to the 2021, I feel like the 2021 with Anya Taylor-Joy just was better in terms of the acting and just the way that they put it together and the way that it came across. I feel like the script and the acting just went really well together, better than the other adaptations, at least from the specific scene that I referred to compare a little bit. Next movie that we have on my favorites list is Romeo and Juliet, the 1996 version, adaptation, whatever, directed by Baz Luhrmann. I'm sorry if you haven't seen it. It's a contemporary take on Romeo and Juliet, so I think it was really cool to see the difference. In terms of Romeo and Juliet adaptations, I haven't watched the old one in a few years, so I can't really compare the two right now. And I've never really been a huge fan of the Romeo and Juliet story in general. However, this movie, it made me like the story better because of the way that they portrayed it to me. I think that putting like a contemporary twist to the movie was really great because it made it more engaging and more fun to watch. And I think that whenever somebody succeeds in making like a story more entertaining than you previously thought before watching the movie, then that means that they did a good job in adapting the story. Like, yeah, that might change things around a bit, but I think that's cool. And yeah. Next movie that is one of my favorites ever is Moonlight, from 2016, directed by Barry Jenkins. You've probably already seen it, already watched it, heard about it 1,000 times because it's such a good movie, but I'm gonna talk about it. So the movie is divided in 3 chapters of a young man's life, and we see his struggle with finding himself, understanding his sexuality, and all of these things. I initially actually wanted to watch this movie for the production of it because I've heard about it so often when it comes to its like depiction of color and emotion. So that aspect of it is what really intrigued me in watching Moonlight at first, because that's what I had heard about when I had been doing some film reading and stuff. That aspect of it was really cool, and I really wanted to see that in action because the relationship between color and emotion when you're portraying things in film is really interesting to me because I want to try those things out. But that plus the actual story just made the movie incredible. My first thing that I think is really, really good is the acting in this movie. The actors did such a good job in depicting their character's emotion and really being tuned in to their character and what they were feeling. I feel like a lot of the times in the movies there were scenes where you wouldn't need them to say a word at all because the actors did such a great job at portraying what the character was feeling, literally just through their facial expressions, which is really impressive. Also, I really liked the fact that there were 3 different chapters in the story because it really felt like you followed the entire journey of the character. Coming of age movies and stuff, I feel like you don't get this much out of a character a lot of the time. But this one I felt like we really got so much out of the character and really got to know the character really well. I watched a few interviews of the Moonlight cast and the director and everything, and I really liked the sense of community that this movie brought, you know? Like when a movie has that big of an impact on people, it's so important and it's so nice to see. The next movie that is also one of my favorite movies is Bright Star from 2009, directed by Jane Campion. I don't know where they're from. This movie is very melancholic, like a lot of videos that I make. This movie is about the love story between Fanny Brawne and John Keats, who was a British poet. And I haven't read any of John Keats' poems. I will soon, hopefully. How their love story kind of goes is that he lives next door to her and then she gets sort of intrigued and then he starts teaching her poetry and then a romance blossoms. So that was really nice for me to watch because I like poetry and romance stories. So they got me. I feel like their love story is really great. I don't know how accurate the movie is because I don't know anything about their lives, but I think that it was done really well and it really shows like a deep connection between the two. It's really good. I don't know what to tell you. It's one of my favorite movies ever. Next movie on my favorites is Fantastic Mr. Fox. Fantastic Mr. Fox is from 2009 as well and is directed by Wes Anderson. Everybody has probably seen this movie because it's amazing. I love watching Wes Anderson films because they're so cartoonish and cool and super cool. There's no other way to put it. Fantastic Mr. Fox is about a fox that used to be a thief, but then he stops his thievery to become a family guy because he has a child cooking up and but then he gets bored and he doesn't like his job, so he decides to go back to his stealing, but it causes some complications. I don't have a review for this or an explanation as to why I like the movie. I feel like anybody who watches this movie is most likely going to like it. I don't know what there is to not like in this movie. It's a really fun watch and you can watch it with anybody, anywhere, ever. Next movie that's also one of my favorites is Billy Elliot, directed by Stephen Daldry. This story is set in the background of the 1984 miners' strike in Britain, which I know nothing about, but it's the story about a kid named Billy Elliot who takes boxing classes, but next door to his boxing classes, there is a ballet class that starts, and he gets curious, so he goes and takes a look at the ballet class, and then suddenly he starts taking ballet classes and he starts to enjoy ballet classes and he's like, wow, ballet. And then throughout the movie we explore like his like of ballet and how that causes conflict with his family because of their disapproval. I also see his inner struggles when it comes to accepting the fact that he likes ballet and what that means and everything. The reason that this movie is one of my favorites, I don't know, it's not the best movie ever, but I love ballet and this movie is nostalgic to me because I watched it at first when I was really young and a ballerina. I also watched the Billy Elliot musical, which was super good too, it's better than the movie. Yeah, this one is probably not for everyone. I don't think everyone would enjoy this movie, but I think it's a great movie that of course talks about ballet and this kid's story, but it also talks about masculinity and sort of like the inner turmoil as well as the just external conflicts and hardships that come with it. I'm just gonna mention some other movies a little bit quicker. These are some other movies that I think are really good and that I would recommend to people if they ask me what movies I like, but they're not my favorite movies, I don't think. I don't know, I'm always changing my mind. Everything that I say is not reliable. Another movie that's really good is Marie Antoinette, 2006 by Sofia Coppola. You've probably already heard of it, but it's just a really good movie. It's on the life of Marie Antoinette. It doesn't really talk about a lot of historical aspects of it. It's really just focused on her own internal being and her own experience. My only criticism is that I wish it had just a little bit more of historical references. It could bring things into perspective a little bit more when it comes to the story of Marie Antoinette. I know that this movie was really focused on just her being as a person and not everything else that was around her, but a little bit of historical aspect of it would have been really cool in terms of just showing the perspective overall. But otherwise, it's a super fun movie to watch. It's super good. The soundtrack is super good too. There's little modern additions into the movie that just make it really more fun to watch. So it's really great movie, done really well, love it. Another movie that I like is Pride and Prejudice, the 2005 adaptation by Joe Wright. This is just a comfort movie for me. I read the book and I think the book is better because it has so much more detail in the story. But I really like this movie. It's just a comfort movie. Next movie that's really great and that everybody should watch if they haven't already is Amélie, 2001, Jean-Pierre Jeunet. I don't have to say anything about this movie. It's a great movie. It's just creative and silly. Really good and really well put together and really thought out. Next we have Pieces of a Woman. Pieces of a Woman is by Cornell Mundruxo. It's a 2020 movie. I found it on the Netflix Oscar nominee page because I was gonna watch them all, but then I didn't want to, so I only watched this one. I think this movie is about a woman that has a home birth and she has a miscarriage, and this movie just shows that process as well as the grief that came after it and how she dealt with it. I haven't ever read a book or watched a movie that talked about pregnancy and miscarriage in this way, so it was really interesting to see something so different that I hadn't seen before. This movie also has a lot of symbolism within it, which I thought was super interesting and super cool when I was watching like a bunch of interviews and explanations of it, because it's super cool to see every single detail that's put into a movie, and I feel like this one had some really cool details that I learned about. Another movie that I really like, I think is great, a lot of people have watched it, it literally won an Oscar, Parasite, 2019 by Bong Joon-ho. Just great movie, really good. A lot of lessons, a lot of important topics talked about, and there's a quote, I'll put it here. There's a quote from this movie that I think about almost every day of my life, and when something sticks with you through a movie that you remember for a long time, to me that means that it's a good movie because it left an impact on the viewer. And also another thing that I have to say is that this movie reminds me of Death of a Salesman, which I read recently. This is a play about a lot of similar subjects, and it's something that I also had to sit and think about for a long time when I read it. If you like Parasite and you like to read, I think that maybe you would enjoy Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. Next movie, Marriage Story. A lot of people make fun of this movie. 2019 by Noah Baumbach. This is another movie that's very different from things I usually watch. It's a movie about divorce. And I think that this movie did a really good job in talking about relationships and making them actually look real, even though it looks silly. I don't think the acting was the best, but I also don't care because I think that through the script we were able to really get everything out of the characters that needed to get. Two last movies, like Last Night in Soho from 2021 by Edgar Wright. It's just a crazy and silly movie. It doesn't have a lot of good reviews, but I don't really care. I think that it was just crazy, and I don't think that every movie needs to be good to be entertaining. And that's everything that I have to say about this one. In the Mood for Love, year 2000 by Wong Kar-wai. This movie's great. It's a love story, a melancholic love story. It's a love story between two people who are neighbors and who were cheated on by their spouse with each other's spouse. Anyway, it's a really good movie. It's filmed really well. It's beautiful looking. And the main reason that I really like it and that it stood out to me is because in this movie, the characters rehearse scenes of things that are gonna happen. And I'd never seen that happen in a movie before, I don't think. Not in this way, at least. So that's something that's really good about this movie that stood out to me. Whenever they have to do something, like in the future, they know that something is gonna happen that they have to do, and they know that it's a hard thing that they're gonna have to do, like a conversation. They rehearse it with each other before. I don't know if that's a spoiler or not, but anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for clicking. Hope that you like hearing about the movies that I like and why I like them. And hopefully you haven't watched all of these and that you will want to watch any of these that I've mentioned. And yeah, that's it. I'm tired. And thank you for listening me talk about my lavalier mic for like a whole minute earlier at the beginning of the video. Bye.